So you had a run in with the fuel pump the other day. What happened?
When you go and fill your boat up on the water, a lot of times they don't have the little clicker on the bottom of the nozzles where you can just click it down and it'll just fill itself. And well, I was actually filling up my car and I flicked a little lever there at the gas pump and it didn't trip. So it didn't shut off the pump. And now there's fuel just pouring out of the side of my car, running down the side of the car. It's all over the ground. And I go to like flick the little lever and I accidentally pull the nozzle out a little bit. So then it blasts me and I got it all down my leg and all on my face. And like I finally get it turned off. It's like this is another disaster.
Of all the hazards that you run into, just a regular old gas station fuel pump got you, man. That's no good.
Well, it kind of got me thinking too. Like I remember the fuel pump there at the marina. There for a while they only wanted you to have like a 25-foot hose on the pump. It's like 25 feet. Like you go to fill up a bigger boat, like you only have 25 feet with the nozzle. It's I knew the lever thing. I was always against it. I was always like, come on, you got to fill up a 200-gallon tank here. And you're just going to hold the handle for an hour and a half. Like,
gotta squeeze that baby.
But now,
I worked my freshman year of college. That summer, I worked at a marina, and I got real good at it was on an inland lake. I got real good at figuring out how to get that angle of the nozzle just right, but I never could figure out a shortcut to get that just to go on auto pump. And it's for good reason. It makes sense. You don't want to spill gas all over in the water.
True.
But it does make it tough.
Well, we used to always put the boat fob in there. So your key fob.
Okay, yeah.
Put the key fob in there for for your key, the key float is a better thing. Stick that in there and that would hold it.
We're always going to find a workaround. U.S. government, you can come up with whatever safety regulations you want, but us boaters, we're going to find a way to work around some of them that just don't make sense.
Yep.
It's like the gas can now that they've got the special spout that you got to pour. I can never get that baby to open up and work around. I always have to unscrew the cap, and now I'm spilling more than if you just left the old gas can on.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
I know a lot of people that use the hose with the little thing on it. The siphon hose.
The shake thing.
Those seem to work pretty good. I know a lot of people that will use those, and you can add 6 or 7 5-gallon cans pretty quick into your boat with the.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good idea. I never thought about using it for that for that purpose. That's really good. So, all right. So you got squirted by the fuel pump. You get everything. I've had it happen where in my truck, and I came out to it. The reason why they didn't is, because it will, if you're away from your truck, it's spilling all over the place. I had some lady come in and say, "Is that your red truck out there? It's spilling gas all over." I'm like, "Oh crap! How much did that cost me?" What are you gonna do?
No, so I thought that'd be a pretty good first topic, but I think so. We're talking about here a lower unit, a 4-year-old Mercury 150. When removing the lower unit for the first time, after a lot of careful pounding and wedging, it didn't work. It finally released when I lowered the engine to vertical, stood on the fins of the lower unit, being the anti-ventilation plate, and bounced up and down with all my weight and had, the nuts loose on it so it would catch it when it came down. But, that is definitely something that I think a lot of people do not think about when you buy a brand new engine, that when they come from the factory with no grease on anything. So
I like the last part of his comment. I'll remove it every year now. Like, yes, remove that baby, grease it up, just do it. It makes a difference. Makes a huge difference. What's the worst one that you've ever had to get off? What's your go-to move when you got one that's stuck?
It depends on how stuck. A lot of times, that's the first step is you go on there, you put one nut on it, and then you stand on the, trim it down vertically and stand on the back and try and jump up and down. But I weigh 160 pounds, so it's like, I'm not really doing all that much. And then you get the heaviest.
I'll come down there and help you. I'll bring my 225 down, give you a little extra jumping power.
Yep. So, and then that doesn't always work though. So when the 320-pound guy at the shop can't get the thing to budge, then you're kind of stuck.
Move on, step 2.
Yep.
Time to bust out the mallets.
Yep, mallets and chisels, and obviously screwdrivers, stuff like that, stuff that you can get to wedge in there. It also kind of depends on the model too. A lot of them, what they do is it's the drive shaft that basically welds itself into the crankshaft, and because there's no grease or anything like that on there, so you're really trying to wedge that down. So wedging around the gear case and the drive shaft housing with different chisels and picks and stuff like that, and just kind of inching down. And if that doesn't work, then you're trying to pull the power head off. And if you can pull the power head off with a forklift and get, some actual.
Okay, so you go that way and just let it naturally fall down.
Yep. Those are kind of your two options.
It's so funny that if you've not been around boating, to think about, I've got to do stuff just so I can do real maintenance like a couple of years from now. Like I got to loosen things and lube things just so I can do the actual maintenance 3 years or 4 years from now, instead of just letting it ride. I don't need to touch my lower unit. It's good. Impeller's good. Like, maybe you want to think about it. Could save you a lot of hassle, a lot of swearing.
Yeah, that's kind of the downfall of it, is that when it comes from the factory, that they don't put any grease on there. It's kind of like weird.
Why do you think they don't do that? Like,
no idea. I mean,
easier?
I have no idea.
Easier, faster? They just want to mess with you, techs. Like, they had a meeting. Hey, listen, what do you guys think about this?
Right.
Aaron down in Florida, in 4 years, we're really going to mess with them on this one.
I'm sure it's probably something to do with put together with a robot or something that,
Yeah.
Who knows?
Sure, it's not out of spite. Mm-hmm. So what do? You grease them up real good when you put them back. That's gonna help them down the line for the next time.
100%. That's basically it. And then it also matters depending on if it's a gear case, because one of the other things that people were saying there is that what if it's a good gear case? So how do you get it off? Then that's the chisels and all that. On the one that people were commenting on, it was actually the gear case was shot.
I saw that video of yours.
Yeah, they're like, well, how did you know it was a bad gear case? Well, there was a hole in the side of it.
I saw this little thing. Wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah. So
did you just go to town with the hammer on it, or?
Yeah, the closest one. I think in that one I had a claw hammer right next to me, so I'm like, I'm using this. Otherwise, you go get
let's get moving to the next step.
Yeah, get yourself a 3-pound dead blow or something like that, and.
That you got to. My dad used to always say, you got to use the right tool for the right job, and sometimes it's the closest tool that'll do the trick.
Yeah,
we'll take it.
Yeah, I try not to do that, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's shot. You're not going to do that on a whatever that guy said 4-year-old lower unit. We'll take a little different approach, but
yeah.
So you had a hole saw video that a lot of people checked out. Let's go to the hole saw one. The hole saw arbor bits that fit together up to a certain size, step bits. You can always put the piece of lumber you cut in that plug out on the top of what you're cutting. I feel like I'm a third grader reading here. You can always put the piece of lumber you can cut out the plug out on top of what you're cutting, use it as a jig. Guy I worked with had a piece of wood in his truck with common holes pre-drilled. That's interesting. Maybe you should have tested the hole size before your idiot self used the wrong size. Problem solved. Oh, yeah. I love when something surprises me in a comment. Like, it just comes out of nowhere. Yeah. You're like, oh my God, that guy, that's funny.
Yeah, I
sticking it to you a little bit. What happened?
In that video. So we use like little wooden plugs. So like right here, I got a couple of them. So just take a 2x4 or a piece of wood and cut out a plug that'll fit in a hole that's already drilled. For the last guy's comment, if you're taking out, so we were taking out an air sensor, and where that air sensor was going to go was, a gauge was going to go there. So we need to move from the small air sensor to that. And yeah, that's something that you can do. I added that other one in there because the jig's a pretty good idea, having a piece of wood and having all the jig sizes. I do like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think on a boat it would be a little more difficult depending on how to fasten the jig down. You know what I'm saying? Like on a dash, there's not really a way to like clamp the jig down, so you're like holding the jig and then drilling. And
hoping you got a steady hand, a good grip.
Yeah. but I like that idea. I mean, that's pretty good. But yeah, on most of them, like your arbor bits, most of them, especially these bigger ones, you can fit 2 on there. So if you put, say, you put a big one like this, and you put that on there, then what you can do on the inside is take your other one, and it'll fit on there like that.
Okay.
That's what they're talking about. Now the problem with that is when you're talking about a 3/4 inch hole, you can't do that on the smaller bits. So if you're trying to go from a hole that's like a 3/4 inch, this arbor bit will only let you put a 3/4 on there. You can't add one.
Okay.
So that trick kind of works up until like 1.25 inches or something. I mean, you can do that. You can double them down all the way down to like 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches. But once you get down to the smaller stuff where we took out an air sensor or somebody's drilled a hole, you kind of got to have another way. So you either got to do the plug or the jig, or I don't know, maybe there is a different hole saw company that makes, the arbor that goes down that small. But
right, I didn't know you were coming with props today. That's good. I like that. You're prepared. You got some props. So yeah, it's funny when you do like the guy that has this jig cut. You do something often enough, as a technician, you do it, or whatever your job is. You come up with all these shortcuts, but the dude just doing it on his own, on his boat, he does a project one time, but he does 30 different projects. He's got to learn the hard way on everything.
Exactly.
Unless he can learn from a guy like you that has solved that puzzle before. That's good.
Oh yeah, there's what do they say? There's 10 different ways to do something.
Yeah. What? Tell me about that, Aaron. What are you talking about?
There's different ways, So
yeah.
I can't think of the analogy right now. Whatever it is.
Yeah. I forget what the topic was. It's like your academy that you have that's got all those videos, like all those shortcuts or stuff that is just invaluable for people that are trying to figure it out themselves. Like there's an easy way to do it, but you got to go through. The first time is always going to be the hardest.
Oh yeah, when you're trying to talk about gaining, years of experience and mistakes in a fast track kind of way, that's definitely the way you want to do it, is to learn from somebody else's mistake.
Learn from someone. What did that guy say? Idiot? Is that what he said? Idiot self?
Before your idiot self used the wrong size. Luckily on that one, I didn't do that. I didn't drill that hole. We were just removing something and adding something. So.
Okay, all right. That wasn't your first hole. That, like, talk about the most nerve-wracking time of a new boat owner. Like the first time you're putting a hole in your new boat, 20-year-old boat that you just got, whatever. Like that is the most nerve-wracking time, especially if it's below the water line.
Oh yeah.
Eventually
you get to that point where you just send it. I mean, I don't mind drilling any. I'll drill a hole. All right, those transducers. There's a hole like this on the bottom of the boat. Be like, oh my
it's
gosh.
Fine. I know how to patch that if I'm off a bit.
Yeah.
I saw a meme the other day that had something like that. Like the guy was mounting a transducer, and like he flush mounted it to the boat or something like that.
Yep.
Like the mistakes that people make, but if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, kind of. Probably your biggest one is I have sent a few screws through. Some
You're like, there's the gel coat outside, and you got a little screw sticking through.
I mean, it's not that often, but I have sent my share of them through. The last one that I did was actually, I don't even know how I did it, because I was mounting a piece of starboard to something as the backing plate, and I grabbed all 4 of the same size screws and checked everything out. It's all good. Sent the first 3 and they're all good. On the 4th one, same size screw came right out the backside of the thing.
Who was laminating this boat? Who was in that mold putting down the fiberglass layers?
Yeah. I mean, so that happens. So that does happen. But
we'll give you a pass on that one. So what kind of grease do you use on bolts? We talked about, we should have done this one earlier on the gear case. When you got something that's stuck, what do you put on there so that it doesn't seize up the next time to make your next job that much easier?
I used to pretty much always use Triple Guard, which was Johnson Evinrude grease, and that stuff was phenomenal. But it's getting harder and harder to get it because obviously Evinrude.
But Johnson Evinrude is no more. Yeah.
But
sad.
I know, but they that was always the go-to. That was probably the best grease ever made. Now probably 2,4-C Mercury Extreme grease or whatever that is, either 2,4-C or the Mercury Extreme or High Performance or whatever they call it. They got some fancy name, but I mean Yamaha's got good grease too. So between Yamaha and Mercury, that's pretty much the two greases that I'll use. Unless, I think in my garage I've got some Red and Tacky grease out there. So if I don't have any of that of the Mercury or Yamaha,
is it kind of like the hammer situation? Whatever's closest to you as you're doing the job. Oh, here we go. I don't have to run to the shop to get this. I just use this real quick.
That's what you got to tell them. I mean, especially new guys. It's like, even if just something. Don't send it dry. Please don't send it dry. Yeah.
It's going to save you or whoever the next guy is working on it hours of frustration and busted up knuckles.
So brand's probably not the most, as long as you're using something.
Grease, grease it up. No Loctite, just grease. I get anxiety when I hear the word Optimax. Maybe talk about how some engines get a bad rap for people having a bad experience with one. I love that question. That's really good.
Yeah, I think that is a really good question. I mean, I don't know. I'm probably partial because I'm kind of an Optimax fan myself. Not an Optipop, but the Optimax. I mean, I still think, they were still a good engine, but yeah, if you didn't know what you were doing and you got poor fuel, they could become a nightmare really, really quick.
And there's also, I don't know if you and I talked about this on another episode, but so an engine or even a boat gets a bad rap for if there's like a certain percentage of people that have issues, but even like the FIC, the Evinrude, the Optimaxes of the early years, the OMC drives and the Force drives, like all of those I'm sure make you like cringe. But there's still, there's a bunch of people out there that say, I've got a 1976 Force that still runs like a top, had it since Grandpappy bought it, and that thing it's rock solid. Like there's a group of people that had a great experience with it, but it's just that 10, maybe 20% that had nightmares, and that's how it gets the rap in your community, and then that gets spread out to everybody else. Yep. But there's a number of people that had good experiences with them.
Yeah,
I think
I was probably,
you're like, I don't think so.
I'm probably in that camp because I talked about my Mako that I had, that 21 Mako 85 with the 250 Ocean Pro. And 2-3 times a week for 3 years, we ran that boat and I never had any problems with that. And that's the one that's got the plastic carburetors, and all kinds of people had nothing but problems with that engine. But I kind of feel like that was always the Johnson Evinrude brand, period. Like either you got a good one or you got like trash.
Yeah. Well, I think another thing that happened is, like, from what I understand, I've never worked on one, but the Forces, if you had it set up just right, they were super reliable, but they were very finicky. So you get somebody that gets in there monkeying and doesn't really know what they're doing, and that thing gets off. Now, for the rest of its life, that's a nightmare. Not really the engine's fault. It's the person that worked on it. But I've also got a belief that, like, if you've got an Optimax that's still running strong now, it's been well cared for, you got a good one. The nerves should be getting less and less every year that goes by, because if there was a bad one, it's popped already. Right? It's dead. It's in the junkyard somewhere.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good way to explain a lot of the two strokes is, you would have some sort, like, let's say you had a carburetor problem or a trigger problem or, you know, a CDI box problem or something. There'd be some sort of a timing issue or something that was starting to fail. Someone would go in there and alter the timing or the injection, and from, you know, from the carburetors, they would, you know, reset the screws to it and kind of get it to run, but they covered up a problem. And then now everybody after the fact is now chasing an underlying problem, and everything they fix is always like they're always chasing their tail because that original problem
Yeah.
was covered up and it never really got resolved. So that's probably a good analogy of how to describe that, the way you said that.
And a lot of boaters, you know, especially, I don't think this generation of boaters so much, but the previous generation, I think of my dad, you know, he changed plugs and he did the work on our engine. I don't ever remember taking it was probably a 75, 85 Mercury 2-stroke. He never took that to the shop.
Mm-hmm.
He did everything. He's not a mechanic, but his generation knew how to tinker with stuff and figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, that works if it's basic enough, like the Mercs were, the Tower of Power, but you get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more precision.
Mm-hmm.
And now my dad starts messing with it, and now he just jacked that thing up, and the next guy's like, what is going on? I got ripped off.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of the way the industry's definitely gone. I mean, we just did a repower on a 39 Seaview with triple V10 400 Mercs, and it's all new rigging, all new everything. The whole system's completely different. And yeah, today's engines, you know, back then, yeah, anybody can go in there and clean the carburetor, kind of, you know, set things up, tinker with it, change some spark plugs, and you can keep the thing running. And now it's like, if you don't have a computer, you're like, you can't work on the engine. Like, I mean, you can, it's not necessarily if it's got fuel, air, and spark, you can make it run. Now there's 30 sensors that are telling the computer how to change the spark, the fuel, and the timing. So like, you have no control over any of the, you know, mechanical aspects of the engine. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that, but as far as the fuel injector duration and how much fuel goes in there and stuff like that. So a lot of times these engines will get a code, and, you know, you look at the dash and it tells you you've got a shift code. Well, the dash only shows you a handful of codes. So one code that you see on the dash could cover 6 or 7 codes that whenever the mechanic puts an actual, you know, laptop on the computer, it'll show what the real problem is. So like that your shift code might be, you know, a sensor failure of some sort. So if you go from your dash and say, oh, I got a shift code, there's something wrong with my lower unit or my shift actuator, that's not necessarily the case, because it's like a general code, you know, it's like the check engine light on your car.
Right. Something's not right in this area, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
you gotta buy the $1,500 software to get that information.
Yep. So, I mean, I kind of miss the days, but I also like the new stuff too. I mean, it's phenomenal.
Well, yeah, they're quieter than ever, which I love. I know some people, especially in the bass boat community, like they like the sound of the 2-stroke, and there's something to that. You know, there's nostalgia of the smell and the sound, but it's nice to go out on the water and all you hear is the rushing of the water against the boat and the music that you're playing. Like that's more relaxing to me. I like it, and you still have the speed and the acceleration, all of that. I'll take the trade-off and the fuel economy.
That's what I was about to say. I was about to say it's the fuel economy that I've noticed. I mean, like those V10s, I mean, at 40 miles an hour, that thing's burning like 12 gallons an hour or something. I mean,
really?
It's just outstanding. Like, you know, wide open throttle, I think it was burning like 30 gallons an hour. Whereas with the L6s that were on there, he wasn't even close to that. So it's,
really,
one thing that's weird about those engines, though, is that they don't have a telltale. So there is no P stream on it. So
really,
I want to see
why did they decide to do that?
Quiet.
You know what's funny is when the Verados came out, that's one of the things that we talked to the engineers. I was selling Sea Ray and Harris at the time, and they said we did our sound analysis, and they pointed the P stream backwards because that lowered the noise level
Yep.
down. Now they just got rid of it altogether. That's
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah. That's, I mean, they did that with the 600, and now, the V10, there's no
Interesting. I didn't know
I
that.
want to say that I saw that there was an accessory to add the Telltale for like $100. Like there's something like $100. I'm like, I bet
I want to upgrade. I want to upgrade so I don't overheat my boat. I want to see that thing every time I'm running at 40 miles an hour.
I kind of want to say that there's going to be a bunch of people that want that accessory put on there.
Yeah. The dealers are like, hey, that's fine. You don't need that Telltale. We'll do a job for you here. That's crazy. It's an option to add that.
Yeah, I want to say I saw that. I ain't 100% on that, but I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere, or maybe I heard it, that there was, that option to add the Telltale to the engine. So
that's funny. That's funny. I used to always tell customers when I was selling boats, I'd be like, listen, you don't get into boating to save money.
Mm-hmm.
Like the gallons per hour burn, it's good. It's helpful if you don't,
mm-hmm.
but still you said, it was what, 12 gallons an hour. Like for some people that blows them away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, holy crap, times 3.
Yeah.
36 gallons an hour is on those trips, but it's not why you do it. Mm-hmm. You do it because you can go 40 ripping down the waterway.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that, obviously it would make some people sick that, some of these guys with these boats, they're spending 35, 40 grand a summer on fuel. So when they look at stuff, it's a different viewpoint. Like, I know people that spend 10 grand in fuel a month during the summer to go to the Bahamas and back. They go over every weekend, and these people are putting hundreds of miles on these engines, and they're just drinking that fuel. So to go from burning, say, 20 gallons an hour to burning 12, 13, 14, it's an astronomical number when you're talking about, $40,000, and you can take 20, 30% off of that. That's saving you it's a lot.
Yeah. It adds up for sure. Yeah. That's interesting. What were do you remember what the, what did you take off? You said you took off Verados?
Yeah, they were 300 L6s, and we put.
Do you know what they ran? Like similar speeds, what the gallons per hour burn was?
At wide open throttle, I want to say it was like 32 or something, 32 gallons an hour. So somewhere in there. I think the 300 might have been a little bit, somewhere about there. The 350 is about 35 gallons an hour. So that one was probably around 30, 31, 32, somewhere in there.
Okay. Yeah. That's crazy. All right. Let's see. This guy, I'm a new subscriber, doing my due diligence before I buy my first boat ever. Questions when buying a used boat. How old is too old? Should I stay away from boats that are more than a couple years old? What are your thoughts on that? I do a lot of videos on this. One came from an old boat video, but how to buy an older boat. What are your thoughts on that in the saltwater environment?
When you're buying a boat, it's all about that budget. So, it's all about that budget and what you got. When you buy a boat, your pockets are what determine what you're buying, because reliability is going to be in your engine. For most boats, the boat's going to be the boat. And as long as you've got an engine, in my opinion, if you got a good engine that can get you where you're going and get you back home, everything else is going to be an add-on. So, outside of the bilge pump. So as long as your float switch and your bilge pump work, and you don't have a hole in the boat, but, besides that, the rest of everything, stereo, GPS, all the other amenities, the way it looks and all that stuff, that's going to relate back to your budget. And you can get an older boat that's been restored. We do a lot of that, or you can get something that's a few years old. But when you're talking about should I buy a used boat? How old is too old? I think it's going to determine about how the boat was taken care of and what the engine situation is. Yeah,
there's two things. Like when I say, hey, you got a budget, great. You got $5 grand, you got 10 grand, you got 20, whatever it is. Just make sure that the structure of the boat is solid. Unless you want a project boat, that's a whole different conversation, which I know you enjoy doing some of those. um, transom solid, and the hull is solid, and then the mechanical. And the lower your budget, you can still find that. You just may have to go through some more turds to before you find the one that's good. And I always say, look at all the red flags. Don't ignore things like the stereo doesn't work, the GPS doesn't work, whatever. It's got the gel coat's all faded and chalky. Fine, I can manual labor that stuff and get that fixed pretty inexpensively. But the boat's solid, the structure is solid, and the engine mechanically sound, and the trailer. Don't forget the trailer. Those are important, more important than you think if you're going to be trailering the boat. And yeah, you can still find a really great boat for 10 grand. And if you've got the skills and the desire to do some tinkering and some manual labor on, making it look nice, installing some aftermarket stuff, you can get a really great boat for a good budget, and then just keep it up, maintain it properly.
Yep.
So in salt, do you have kind of a time period where you get really nervous about engines, like an engine that's over 10 years old, or anything like that? Or do you not have that sense in the saltwater environment?
I guess it would depend more on the engine itself. So the make and the model is going to play a big part. But for me, saltwater, once you get over 15 years, you're getting into that territory of, things are gonna start breaking at this point in time.
Yeah.
It's just the environment, the rust, the corrosion, stuff like that. But at the same time, people are running 25-year-old engines still offshore, so it's all back to that care and maintenance of also the running. Like on my Mako with the Ocean Pro, we ran the engine 2 to 3 times a week. So for one, it had, got rid of the oil pump. So we pre-mixed it. So it was getting oiled all the time. I mean, I went heavy on the oil, and I would rather buy oil and smoke more and know everything's being lubricated properly. So I was running fuel through the fuel system, oil through the fuel and oil system. So it was all getting cleaned and lubed and running, using the trim unit. Like everything was getting used. And as long as everything's getting used, it doesn't have time to sit there and seize up. And then when you go to use it, the seized up part now breaks. And
now
and now you got a problem.
Yeah. It's amazing. Like, people are always on my channel. I focus a lot more on buying boats, and a lot of first time boaters I talk to, but they're like, "Oh, I found this boat. It's beautiful. It's 20 years old. It's been in the garage for 5 years, and they're selling it. It's a great deal." I'm like, be careful. But boats do better. Anything mechanical, boats do better when they're run consistently.
Yep.
And just like your stator that went out after 8 months of not running it, that's a fairly short amount of time, but it has, especially in saltwater, especially in that salt environment.
Oh yeah, and I found out on that one, and it wasn't even the stator; it was the actual ECU. So that was a whole.
Oh really? Okay, I didn't know that.
It was a whole nother blunder, but honestly though, those can be also good finds too. When you find a boat that got, put away and it's got 40 hours on it, and they got shoved in a garage and it's been sitting in this barn for, 10 years, sometimes you can find a pretty good deal. Obviously, when you're going to pull this thing out, and when you start using it, like we were talking about with stuff breaking, that stuff's going to break, but eventually you're going to come to that apex where all those things are fixed. All the things that are going to break are fixed. And now you've got this boat with 50, 60, 100 hours on it. Looks clean, pristine, because it was stored away, and boom, you're up and rocking and rolling. So that's kind of maybe the way to think about it is that you definitely can look at things, and before you even take the boat out, work everything, check the steering, make sure it goes back and forth, trim the engine up and down, make sure you spray stuff with WD-40, PB Blaster, Kroll, lubricants, take the lower unit off, grease everything up, put it back on there. And then when you go out, hopefully a lot of the stuff that you oiled up and greased up, all that stuff, you're not going to have a problem with it because you addressed it before. You just went and put the thing in the water and tried to run out and,
Yeah. You just hit out on the 4th of July weekend and let a rip.
Yeah.
Go into it with the right mentality. Not quite a project boat, but I'm gonna do this smart. I'm gonna take advantage of the opportunity, but I'm gonna slow down a little bit before I hit the water. That's interesting. I like that. I like that take. I like that take. If you have that mentality, if you have that knowledge of what to lubricate, when you restore boats, like if you've got a project boat, what are your I'll walk away if it has this is a solid boat that I can turn into something that's going to be great. Do you kind of have a checklist that you go through, or is it just you get the feeling that you like this boat?
Yeah, it's all make, model, and time. So right now I don't have that much time, so I'm not doing fiberglass projects or fuel tanks, any of those bigger projects with glass. I'm not doing anything like that right now. I'm looking for something that's less. I'm not willing to put that much work in, even if I did have an old Mako or something like that. I at this point in time, but next year I might have time, and if I do have time, then I will do a transom or do a fuel tank or something like that. So mine's more the foreseeable time that I have in the future.
Good, like a transom. I don't want to say it. It's not hard work. It's just time consuming work. Like you got curing time and you got prep time and you got all that, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to do it.
No. And once you have all your materials, you have the space to do it. It obviously can be out in the rain, stuff like that.
Right.
By in general, you're looking at spending a week to 7 days.
Are you talking like 8-hour days? Or are you talking I get home from work and I put 3 or 4 hours in a night?
No, I'm talking this is all you're going to be doing is the transom. but it's not really 8-hour days. So the first day, you can really get a lot of it. You might have 12, 14 hours in your first day, whereas your first day is getting everything off the transom, getting it cut out, depending on the boat, like a lot of center consoles, stuff like that. The transoms you'll do from the outside. Some other boats, older stuff with inboards or different styles, you'll do them from the inside, depending on how that cap deck situation looks like. A lot of center consoles, the way they're made, you do them from the outside. So get everything off the transom, cut the transom out, grind everything down, and that might take you, 12 hours. The next day, get everything prepped out. So you cut your Kusa or whatever you're using for the transom, cut all your glass pieces out, lay everything out, and then you'll come back the next day, lay it all up. So now that only might take you, 3 hours to lay everything up. Now you got to let it dry, and then, come back in between intervals of dry times and cure times. So as you get towards the end, you're not doing as much as the beginning. The beginning's usually the most time consuming. So you'll have, 2 or 3, 12, 10-hour days. And then the last couple of days might only be 3 hours here, 2 hours there.
What about when you're doing fuel tank? That seems like a project that's overwhelming to me. Cutting everything out, getting that out. Is that a nightmare job, or is it not as bad as my mind takes me to?
They're like 50-50 of whether you've got access to get to the tank or you don't. So like older Parkers, stuff like that, have a solid deck. There is no access. You have to measure, go down in the bilge and measure from the stringers, to the gunnels. So that way you know where to go on the top of the deck, and then cut with a saw, circular saw, the deck out, get that popped out, and then dig out all the foam and get in there and get that tank out. And you really need some kind of an A-frame or a forklift or something to get that tank to pop out, because most of them are so stuck in there that getting them out can be a chore. But other ones, they have access where you just cut the silicone, you can pop the access out. Now pop the tank out, make one, boom, you're good to go. Some center consoles, though, most of the center consoles, the center console is sitting on top of the tank. So that's a whole nother story, because now you got to take the entire center console up, which means all the electrical has to come, be undone.
Yep.
So the model of the boat is really going to determine the time frame and complication of how bad it's going to be to do that tank.
Is there a time when you started seeing more access panels being used and thinking more about these have to be replaced at some point, or we're just sticking them in where we need to for buoyancy purposes and balance of the boat, and that's all we care about?
I think most of them are all buoyancy balance based thing, and I mean the model of the boat, Parkers, Seavies, Yellowfins, all those boats, they don't have removable tanks. I mean, some of them have a Venture, they have fiberglass tanks built into the deck of the boat, so or the hull of the boat, and other ones have aluminum tanks. Boston Whalers have plastic tanks, so it's kind of the make and the model of the boat that really determines how they put that together.
How long will aluminum tank last in saltwater? Like, when do you start getting nervous about what's that smell?
Yeah. 20. I mean, it really varies because of a lot of aluminum tanks. You got to remember that somebody built that, they welded it, so every tank's a little different. And
who's that welder?
Yeah. Who was the welder? How was his day going when he put them welds on? And also just in general, I mean, a 20-year-old Parker, you ought to be saving your money to be putting a fuel tank in that. And then anything over 30 years, just you plan on that.
Put it on the books.
Put it on the books, because in the future it's going to be happening. Can you get lucky and run 10 years and not have to deal with it? Yes. Can you buy that boat and 2 years later have to put a fuel tank in it for 10 grand? Yes.
Absolutely. That's good. I think that's really helpful for a lot of people. I was thinking about getting sea decking for my boat. Does this stuff wash down easily, or can it just be removed? Would be fishing and hopefully catching fish. Yep. Like a washable deck. Also want to be able to chill out some days with the wife.
I'm a fan of sea deck, but at the same time, if you clean it a lot, then it will wear out. So when it does wear out, it is not removable. I mean, like,
not without some effort anyway.
Yeah.
Some scraping.
Definite scraping and cleaning. And once it is removed, a lot of times there's other repairs that are going to need to be done, because that stuff goes down and it is put down. It's not meant to be removed. So I've seen people where they removed it, and in order to not have to put it back on, they had to resurface the entire deck, re-gel coat, everything like that. And then other times, the best way is that once you put SeaDek on, you keep SeaDek on the boat. So, in 5, 6, 10 years, whenever it wears out, then you pull it up and replace it.
And it's porous. I mean, it's foam. Mm-hmm. The blood and the guts, and hopefully you're catching fish, but that stuff's gonna sink into it or absorb into it. And it's, I don't know. My thought is just having a textured gel coated floor is going to be easier. Now, it's not as comfortable on the feet, doesn't look as nice.
Yeah.
But when it comes to ease of maintenance, that's what I like. I'll give up some flash for some ease every day of the week, and I think it could be easier just having basic gel coat.
Yeah, there's so like SeaDek is going to be softer. I think it's one of the softer of them. I mean, there's so many that make them now, but I think the two that are the most prominent are Marine Mat and the SeaDek. And Marine Mat, I think, is a little bit denser. So
it is okay.
It holds up more, but you lose that cushion. Whereas the SeaDek, it's a lot more cushiony, but it does wear out quicker because you do get that cushiony. But it is nice, like what he's talking about. What do you say? Chill out on some days with the wife. I mean, I know a lot of people that have just fully SeaDecked the whole boat, and it's pretty nice if you run around barefoot on the boat. It definitely is.
A lot cooler,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's definitely an amenity.
And when you put it on, make sure you prep it right, especially at the edges.
Yes.
Make sure you get that prepped right, nice and clean, everything that you're supposed to do on the instructions. What size gasket do I buy for the third gasket if my prop shaft is scratched? Talked about a scratched prop shaft and putting an O-ring between the seal and adding a third seal.
Yeah. So on some lower units, people might get a scratch in their prop shaft, or older units. A lot of times, it's very common that somebody has been in there trying to take the seals out and scratch the prop shaft. And so, a couple tricks. That was a video about changing prop shafts. A couple tricks that over the years you can do is one. So most of the time, there's two seals that are on the lower unit that go on the prop shaft. You can take an O-ring and stick that. You put the first seal in, you put an O-ring there, and then you put the second seal, and that O-ring helps to keep, it helps keep pressure, and it helps keep the lower unit from leaking. And then there are other models of lower units that you can add a third seal. It's not really a different size gasket. It's just you add a third seal, but you can't do that on all of them. So there are some models that you can only fit the two, or else the prop hub will be rubbing it.
It's too tight. Yeah. Interesting. I've never even thought about a scratched prop shaft. Like I could have. I guess that makes sense though. If you get something in there and you're prying out, you're end up in the wrong spot. Let's see. I was told by a dealer that because their new boats require a break-in period, they can't be test driven. Turn me off. What would you do in this case? I would find a new dealer. That to me, it seems ridiculous that a dealer would not allow a serious buyer that has put a deposit on the boat to run the boat before writing that final check, signing the final paperwork. That it just seems crazy to me.
Yeah, that sounds like it's probably a smaller dealership that is maybe not. That sounds like something that would happen at a very small dealership where the owner is basically the only person that works there. And he's trying to not put time on the engine because he doesn't think you're a serious buyer. But yeah, I mean, everywhere else that I've gone, I mean, they kind of want to do the test run because the test run's like the nail in the coffin, really. I mean, it's like
yeah, exactly.
Like, everybody's agreed on terms and this, that, and everything. We like the boat, we like this, we like that, and obviously you'll get looky-loos that are trying to get a free boat ride, but by and large, most people, when they're buying a boat, they, well, I mean, I would want to go for a ride on the boat before I buy it.
Yeah. That's I tell people, if you can't run the boat before you buy it, don't buy it. There's plenty of other boats out there, new. Even if you're in love with a certain brand and a certain model, if that dealer isn't easy to work with when you're in the buying process, what happens when you have a warranty claim? And you're going to have a warranty claim. There's no question about it. Boating, things happen, and you need a good dealer relationship. And if they're tough to work with when they're trying to get your money, imagine how they're going to be once they have your money and now you want something else from them.
No. Yeah, it just sounds weird, Weird
is right.
Like at the marina or the other dealers that I worked at, it was always like the salesman, the guy selling the boat, was like wanting everybody, he's like, oh, no, you guys aren't doing nothing else in this yard till that boat goes in the water because I got people coming at 10 to go on a test drive. Like, he's trying to get them to sign and buy the boat. They're trying to spend $100,000 and buy this boat. Like, they want, we would do that. And I mean, obviously, you don't want to put time on a new boat. Obviously, you don't want to have a new boat that's got 40 hours on it from doing all these test drives. But at the same time,
right,
most dealerships, there's a lot of, preventative stuff there. You go through a deal, you work around the boat, you have, the finances part done where they go to the bank, or if you're paying cash or whatever, you've proven that you can purchase the boat and that, you really plan on buying this boat, bar the test
Right.
drive.
Yeah. I've even I sold a lot of boats, and I always tried to get people on the water. It was just like nothing sells a boat like the wind through your hair and them driving it, for the first time, making sure it's the right boat for them too. Like that's part of it. But as a salesperson, that's the lifestyle that you're trying to get them into, or get them to move up to if it's a different boat. But I had a customer of mine that he bought a demo boat that we did a lot of demos on. And he said, I will always try to buy a demo boat because I think the way you guys do your test drives of, you run it, everybody wants to see some wide open throttle, but you do that for, just a little bit. He's like, that break in for my boat, like my boat's just rock solid. My engine has been solid. I get great gallons per hour burn on it. Haven't had a lick of problems. And he got more speed out of it than similar people, similar boats, similar motors. And he was insistent that it was because of the way we did our demos. It was helpful because you got to do the break-in period.
Yeah.
And you got to do your pre-delivery inspection.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if you did those for the dealers that you were at, but that boat should be run before it gets handed off to the customer.
Oh, yeah.
It's
most manufacturers do want, most of them have a 10-hour break-in period where, everything on the engine's breaking in, the lower unit, the pistons, the rings, the valves, everything's kind of, it's all brand new metal. So it's all kind of like working itself together. And by and large, most of them say for your break-in period, they want the first 2 hours to be, every 10, 15 minutes, you vary the RPM and no more wide open throttle than 5 minutes at a time every hour. So pretty much that'll pretty much hold all the way till 10 hours. So if they want a 10-hour break-in period, you basically run the boat at 1500 RPM for 10 minutes and then run it at 2500 RPM for 10 minutes and then 3500, 4500, and then 5 minutes at wide open throttle. And then just every 10 minutes, you just change the RPM. And that's pretty much, I think the only thing they tell you that they don't want is the boat to just idle. So they don't want high idle time.
Idle for long periods of time. Yep. Yeah. Anything just sitting at the same for a long. I always thought that would be a fun business for a young kid. Is, hey, listen, I'll break in all your boats. Once you sell them, I'll go and I'll put the first 10 hours on every boat you sell, so the customer doesn't have to, and just go for boat rides every day. That would be all right. That would be good. Yeah. All right. Here's another one. It seems outboards would be far more trouble-free if they were air-cooled, I guess, versus water-cooled. I don't know. Like, I don't think it works that way, but
yeah, I mean, I only know of a handful of air-cooled engines. Pretty much mainly the only one was that Ted Williams from 1960 something. And
I don't even know what that is. What is that?
I don't know. It's the Ted Williams outboard.
Ted Williams, the baseball player?
Yeah.
That's what I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, no, I mean, there was an old Ted Williams. That's what it was. It was a Ted Williams, like 3.5 or something, or 5 or
interesting.
Something. And yeah, it was air cooled. It was an air cooled outboard. I just don't think that the power of an outboard and the abuse that it gets. I mean, most outboards are running 5,000-6,000 RPM consistently. So you're running 5,000, 5,500 RPM for 30 minutes in a strip. So I don't know if air cooled can really get the block temperature cool enough to be feasible. I mean, sometimes oil temp can get up well into the 200 degrees. So, will air cool really cool off 240 degrees? I don't know if you can really get that same cooling. I don't think you can. And that's why they're water cooled, is the temperatures are too high and the RPM is too high to.
So I think about in the coastal environment, sucking that. I mean, think of all the spray you've already get. With just a little bit of ventilation you already get salt up inside the cowling without the additional openings, I guess, that you would need to have it air cooled.
Even the outboards that they try to do different stuff with, to make them soup them up and get more air to them and put scoops in the front, a lot of those engines have problems because they're sucking in so much.
That salt's going to get you one way. All right, then you got, let's see, here's another one. Then you got boat makers like Cigarette, Midnight Express that make boats with 4, 5, and 6 really big 650 horsepower motors at a whopping 75,000 each. I don't know what video this came from, but tell me about that video. That sounds awesome.
I think that one I was talking about just having multiple engines on a boat, either one or two
Okay.
outboard, something like that. But yeah, no. And honestly, 650, nothing, 620. You're talking about stuff like a 7 Marine 627 and 75 is actually a little cheap. Them biscuits are more like 130.
that was what, 7 years ago when they came out with that? Maybe even maybe it was. That was before things just shot up even as crazy as they are
Volvo
now.
Killed that like 2 years ago or something, 3 years ago or something. But I mean, Mercury's 600 is like $100,000. Yeah, they ain't cheap. I mean,
I saw this meme that said something. It was I think it was a Scout maybe with sextuplets, and it said this guy just spins the earth around to move. Like they're going so fast. We'll just get around the earth by cranking these babies up and spin the earth to our needs. But it is, I mean, it's crazy. But that segment, I was talking to a dealer that actually carried Scout 6 months ago, and he said that segment is so important for these manufacturers that they're everything's scaling up. The more engines, more electronics, more features, more misters and LED lights and more expensive sound systems. He said there's not many people that are making the more entry level models because there's so much demand for these higher end, bigger, faster, more fancy boats. It's where the market's got the money. There's people that have $1 million to drop on their third boat to add to the mix.
Widen the gap between the poor and the rich.
My family's got a place at the Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri, and I came around to Bend by our place and saw this beautiful, beautiful home, like 8,000 square feet. Wow. Sitting on the dock was a G23 Nautique. I'm not sure if it was a Paragon or not, but G23, a 42 Sea Ray Sundancer, and then a 24, I think it was an Outrage, Whaler Outrage. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
That's a dream set. Like, what do you want to do? The only thing they didn't have was a big old, pontoon, a Barletta twin engine pontoon sitting there for their party boat. But you're just like, gosh, dang, that is, any one of those would be a great boat to have, let alone all three of them.
Yeah, for the Lake of the Ozarks, it seems like they were missing the Donzi or the Fountain that did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be the Cigarette.
Yeah, the Cigarette. They need to top off or
something. This weekend is the Lake of the Ozarks shootout, where they've got the races, which is a blast. It gets crazy down there, but it is a fun event if you ever have an opportunity to get to that. Just they line up on the main channel. Everybody anchors out with their sterns to the race area, and I mean there's a pontoon that goes, I think 103 last year was the twin engine pontoon, and boats running 200, 210. It's incredible. It is a really, really fun event.
Yeah, I've only been to the Lake of the Ozarks once, and I didn't even get to do any of that fun stuff. But now what's the temperature like up there? What's it stay? Is it?
It's like right between Kansas City and St. Louis, maybe just a touch south. So it's Midwest. Memorial Day, the water's still chilly, but it's 75, 80 degrees. My parents just got back, and it was 95 to 100 there right now. After Labor Day, trees start turning. There's a little bit of elevation there, but not much. But Labor Day, everything shuts down. And I mean, you can have snow early October.
Oh,
but they get winter. We leave our floating dock in, but the lake freezes in areas, in the shallow coves, but it's deep enough and enough water flow through it that it doesn't freeze over the whole lake. But it's typical. I grew up in Nebraska weather, probably similar to Illinois weather for the most part. But it's fun. We started going down there when I was 5 years old. So we had a 16-foot Larson tri-haul that we took there. If you try to take that baby out on the water this weekend, you're not making it home unless you're hitching a ride from somebody else. That baby's getting swamped in a hurry.
Wow. So, yeah, I think I was trying to think of how long the boating season is up there, and it's like 3 months actually, huh?
Yeah, they've got a boat show in April, which we've gone there by boat a couple of times, but it's cold. If we have it, usually the boats will get winterized mid-September, end of September, but you could start freezing in September at late September, soft freeze, but enough to get you a little nervous. yeah, exactly. You're like, you don't want any water in there at all. But yeah, it's 4 months it's about it, and then you're done. But it's 4 months of fun. That's for sure. So, all right, let's go one more. We got adding the flush attachment to the boat instead of using the OEM attachment that is hard to get to on a pontoon. The flush is fine and easy, but when you're in your mid-70s, you can't get down there anymore. The flush move is what you want.
Yep, that's definitely a truth. There's quite a few comments on that video where we moved. They was on a pontoon boat, and I think he's got a 150 or a 115 on there, and Yamaha's got the little flush attachment on the side of the engine. But on a pontoon, it's back a little bit. You got the fuel tank there, and there's a deck thing that goes over the top of it. So the guy's, he's in his mid-70s. He's like, I can't get down there anymore.
I'd love to flush my engine. It just ain't happening.
He's like, I want to flush my engine, but there was a lot of people that were like, well, because we we took the flush thing off, cut the hose, added a thinning in there, and then ran a hose up to where he could, just bend down to the back of the boat, click his hose in, and not, have to, climb over the fuel tank and like do some athletics to get down there. And that's what people are saying. They're like, oh, you should have just left just use the flush attachment. It's like, I'm with you on that. But when you're 80 years old and you can't bend down like that, don't worry, like you can't do it anymore.
Yeah. It's amazing. There are two things. It's amazing that boat manufacturers oftentimes don't think about the application and the ongoing maintenance sometimes. Yeah, I think where bilge pumps are put at times, like, this has to be changed, but there's also the comments of fun, well-meaning subscribers that point out the obvious. You're like, you don't think I thought about that? Like, we didn't have that conversation of how can we do this without having to reroute this flush mount.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's also kind of like when you're young, you don't think, when you're like, you don't think, you only see what you see in a video based on, what is able to be edited in, what video you got and stuff like that. But you didn't think about, there's an 80-year-old man that can't get down there and, underneath that thing to hook up his flush attachment.
Listen, I'm wearing a knee brace right now. I'm icing my knee as we do this podcast because I just came from the gym right before. I understand the getting old thing. Things aren't as easy as they were, even jumping down off a boat. I used to think nothing about hopping off a swim platform, and now I'm like, all right, how are we going to approach this? We're going to sit down on our butt and scooch off, I think.
Oh, yeah. I've tried to embrace that into my brain a long time ago of just sitting down and scooting off, or like stepping on the engine, stepping down, getting a ladder, climbing down. That jumping off stuff. I know, a lot of people that were probably my age when I started, that's the way they were. But I never did that because I knew, I was like, I'm going to be doing this for a long time. So I need to.
I could see into the future that this is going to be problematic at some point.
Oh yeah, 100%. And so So I don't have that problem yet, but yeah, I don't do that neither because I know, when you get on 1,000 boats in a year, it's like you jumping off everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Takes an extra 2 minutes to get the ladder. Awesome. Well, this has been another good one, Aaron. Been fun. Sure.